So today I'm going to make a Quilt-As-You-Go hexagon using the fabric scraps that I was given on my trip to Uzbekistan. Some of the pieces are quite large and others are considerably smaller. They're a special type of cloth which is commonly known as ikat, and in Uzbekistan they call it atlas or adres. This type of cloth is made by tie-dyeing the threads before they are put on the loom to weave, and in Uzbekistan it is used to make very elaborate clothing like these jackets or chapans as they are called in Uzbekistan. And this piece is a different weaving technique that I know as rep. And I'm not going to go into all the nerdy weaving details. I was given all these great fabrics when we visited a part of Uzbekistan that doesn't get a lot of tourists. Hello from the Fergana airport. I almost forgot to do my intro from here. I will tell you all about my short stay here in a minute. The Fergana Valley is home to many, many craft studios, including this place where they weave silk rugs. Do you notice her cell phone that she watches while she's weaving? And they also make hand-woven velvet fabric there, another fabric that I didn't know how to make, so I was really happy to learn about that. And when we visited this pottery studio, we were interviewed by a very well-known Uzbek travel reporter. This country so much. I think it's my favorite country I've been to. I didn't know what to expect, and it's exceeded my expectations so much. Things like this just don't happen to me on trips. Uzbekistan was so magical. And this piece of fabulous fabric is called Khan Atlas, the King's ikat. Doesn't it remind you of these flowers that I saw on the market? And I'd hoped to be able to actually get out of the city and see some wild tulips while I was in Uzbekistan. Unfortunately, while I was there, it was raining a lot. So that gave me an idea. If I wasn't able to see wild tulips in their native environment, I could create my own textile wild tulip. I have this collection of Quilt-As-You-Go hexagons that I've been working on for the last few years. And I've made quite a few tutorial videos showing how I made some of these hexagons, and I will leave a link to a playlist if you'd like to go back and have a look and see how I made some of these. Today, this is my inspiration. I'm going to make a Quilt-As-You-Go hexagon using the scraps that I brought back from Uzbekistan, and it's going to be a somewhat whimsical, perhaps, wild tulip. The wild tulips are quite small and they have pointy petals rather than the rounded ones that we're more used to in the cultivated tulips. And for some reason, I thought I would put my wild tulip into a pot. So I'm going to start out by cutting out the background, and this piece here is very conveniently already has some quilt padding in it, so I'll just have to add some more to the top, and I'm going to use some of that lovely, lovely hand-woven silk velvet for my pot. And then this piece of narrow, narrow fabric I think will work for the tulip. But for the background, I'm going to use this other piece of cotton here. And I think that works out quite well. And I have two sides to the background fabric, and I think I'm going to go with a lighter color there. And the pink is perfect for a tulip. But I don't know if I have enough room for the tulip with the pot there. And I'm going to try out a few different things. Maybe if I make the petals a little smaller, let's see if that works. But I'm really struggling to try to fit in the tulip and the pot in this piece. So I've tried a few different ways, but then I thought of this quote that I love so much, deciding that everything is falling into place perfectly, as long as you don't get too picky about what you mean by place or perfectly. And so I changed my plans and decided that I will not use the pot at all, even though I really love that velvet ikat and I really wanted to use it. And I'll just situate my tulip directly on the background, which probably makes more sense for a wild tulip, doesn't it? And now I'm going to start sewing. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up my background. So I've got another piece of the quilt batting that I'm going to use in the top part, and I'm just going to base down the cloth, and I'm using the back side of it because I like the lighter color better. And you'll notice here on the back things have shifted a little bit, but I'm not going to worry about that because I can always cover up the back with another piece of cloth. And even though I laid out my tulip, I'm not going to pin it all down and sew it into place exactly as I planned. Now I'm going to just pick up my first petal and start sewing it down. And I thought I was going to use blanket stitch because this cloth is fraying quite a lot. But in the end, I think I just decided that it wasn't worth the extra hassle, and I used just an overcast stitch going around and around and around to secure the edges. And then when the first petal was finished, I picked up the second petal and added this one. And things are not going to look exactly as I had laid them out in the beginning, and I'm quite all right with that. I really like to allow things to emerge as you go along, and you might notice that my tulip is not straight up and down. It's kind of leaning over to one side, and personally I really like that. Plants in nature don't typically grow straight up and down in a really rigid way. Sometimes they lean over to one side or the other, and this gives me a much more relaxed and casual look to my composition than if I had laid it out as rigidly as I had planned it out. So once all the petals are in place, I'll remind myself again not to get too picky about place or perfectly. And I happened to notice some pieces of trim, and as a maximalist, I decided to add another layer of detail to my piece. And I didn't like the chunky green rickrack at the horizon line there, so I decided to go with this more smooth textured blue trim, and I quite like that. So my pro tip for you here is that things that are higher up appear to be further away and should have less detail, and things that are closer to you are lower down in your composition. So I decided that the chunky green rickrack would look better if it was lower down in my composition. And then off camera, I added the leaves to my tulip pretty much the same way that I did the petals. And then I decided to add these little round circles. Why, you ask? Because they represent something called Kurt. And what is Kurt, you might ask? This is Kurt. Kurt is like a dried out piece of very salty, crumbly cheese, and it's like a desert superfood. It doesn't have to be refrigerated, and it'll last for 7 to 8 years. That's right, 7 to 8 years without being refrigerated. It has all kinds of nutritional properties, and I'm told that in Central Asia, everybody carries some around in their pocket. And we'd actually seen Quirt in some of the markets, and we didn't know what it was until a young man that we met gave us his Quirt supply. We'd spent a morning with a family of weavers learning all about Uzbek hand weaving techniques and doing some tie-dyeing. And here we are with the whole crew. And talk about generational learning. The little girl spent all her time sitting beside her grandma and learning about all the different techniques for working with silk. And one of the guides was really intrigued by my sketching process, and I ended up giving him a rather impromptu drawing lesson because he said he really wanted to learn how to draw. And in return, he shared his Kurt with me. So I really felt like I wanted some pieces of Kurt to be included in this piece that I'm working on. And I could have stopped there, but again, as a maximalist, I always like to add more. And I have all these beautiful sparkly threads. And I thought this piece can use a little bit of sparkles. So I added sparkly outlines around the leaves and the petals and the stem of my tulip. And I thought that that looked pretty good as it was, and it was time to finish off the back. So I took that Hun atlas that reminded me so much of the cultivated tulips that there were in the market. And I used it to cover up all of the uneven edges and the messy back of my piece. And then I used the same cloth as I've used in the background to bind all the edges. I cut out a long narrow strip off this cloth and I folded it over the edge and completely finished off my piece. So the whole thing, front, back, and edges are all finished, ready to be sewn into something at some point in the future. And then I thought my piece was done again, but I can never resist an opportunity to add more. I thought that I wanted my tulip to stand out a little bit more from the background, so I took a permanent marker and went around the edges of my tulip with that. And now I think I'm finished now. What do you think? Should I have stopped earlier? Should I do more? Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video.